My name is Kimberly Herring. I live in Rochester, New York. Before I got arrested, I had a good job. Let's see, I'm a CNA, which is a certified nurse's assistant. I have 2 daughters. They're 12 years apart. The oldest is 21 now, and the baby, she'll be 9 in July.
Public defender. A public defender is an attorney employed by your community to give legal aid to any person financially unable to retain counsel.
If I had good representation, I think I would have been out of jail sooner than I was. I think I would have been allowed to say my last goodbye to my husband. Yeah, that I do.
Indigent defense is the constitutional right of everyone to have a lawyer present for them when the state brings criminal charges against them and accuses them of something. We have a presumption of innocence in this country, and the idea of our criminal justice system, the fundamental fairness notion on which it's based, is that everybody should have a fair shot in that courtroom. And on one side, you have the prosecutor and the entire state of New York marshaling its resources to say that this person committed this crime. That system only works at producing the truth to the answer of who really committed that crime if on the other side of that equation, you have an equally strong advocate testing the prosecution's case and making sure they've got the right person and that we're punishing them in an appropriate way. So indigent defense is the idea that if you are too poor to be able to afford your own Johnny Cochran in this world, that the state should make sure that you have a competent lawyer standing on your side, not only to protect your rights as a person, but also for all of us to make sure that the outcomes of those proceedings are fair and correct and that the right person gets locked up. The problem with indigent defense in New York is that, unfortunately, since 1963, the state of New York has done almost nothing to make sure that the system that exists to provide lawyers to poor people is functional. We've never given enough money to the system. The state's never paid enough attention to how the system gets administered. And so the hardworking lawyers throughout the state of New York who provide these services to people who are too poor to afford a private lawyer don't have the support networks they need to make sure they're providing the services that their clients are entitled to under the Constitution.
September the 12th, 2007, a day I'll never forget.
What happened to Jackie Winbrown is really one of the most tragic stories I've heard in New York, resulting from our broken indigent criminal defense system. Jackie was involved in a fight with her late husband, and things got out of hand.
We had been having a disagreement the night before. I came back and it escalated into a real nasty argument. I ran out the door and he wouldn't let me back in. I made a phone call back to him and we were still disagreeing, and he told me not to come back home. The police looking for me. And I was like, as long as my daughter's coming there, I'm coming there. And so I went back to see, was he out of his mind? Because it wasn't his character. It wasn't even him. That was nothing like the Greg I knew. So when I get back, the police is in my driveway waiting on me. So I pulled up and the police told me the accusations my husband allegedly made. And they searched my purse, then they searched the vehicle, and they found the gun in the vehicle.
Jackie was innocent of any crime, and her husband put a gun in a car that Jackie drove away in after they had an argument. And then her husband called the police, and Jackie was arrested with the gun in the car. Jackie, of course, had no idea that there was a gun in the car, and the gun didn't belong to her. Now, you know, you could understand why the police would arrest her under these circumstances. Obviously, this was a crazy situation and something happened. But again, that's where a person's lawyer comes in and should be investigating what happened, listening to what Jackie said, and communicating that to the people who arrested her and to the prosecutor and saying, look, you've got the wrong woman here. But that's not what happened. Instead, Jackie spent weeks in jail before she had any contact with a lawyer who would listen to her pleas of, you know, I'm innocent.
The days I can remember the most is September the 12th and September the 17th. They locked me up. Then my husband died. Those are 2 days that are really hard for me, especially September the 17th. It's so hard for me to get through that day. I don't care from year to year, and it's been almost 5 years like you said, but 5 years still haven't healed this pain. It still hasn't healed the pain of losing my husband.
Just in a tragedy that just gets me every time. While she was in jail for those weeks, her husband, who had you know, a terminal case of severe diabetes, died of kidney failure. And she, again, you know, she didn't know who her lawyer was, and she tried to call her lawyer to get out to even just go to the funeral of her husband, and she couldn't even get out of jail to go to her husband's funeral. And that's all because she didn't have anyone there standing for her. Standing up for her rights. If that happened to you or your sister or your aunt or your neighbor, I mean, can you just imagine how painful that was for her?
I got arrested September 27th of 07. I didn't get out to January 28th of 08. Never been in trouble before.
Kimberly Herring, who's the lead plaintiff in this case, is a woman who made a mistake. She was bullied by her ex-husband, who was in prison at the time, into bringing him a small amount of marijuana when she visited him in jail. And she gave in to that, unfortunately, and she got caught.
21.1 grams. I brought it for my husband's use. He asked for it. He wanted it. It was his decision. Anything to make him happy. And when I sat there, I beat myself up. I literally beat myself up. Because I knew right from wrong.
But the thing about what happened to Kimberly is that she knew, and we all know, that she should be punished for the crime she committed. But she was punished for a crime she didn't commit. She was punished for a felony offense, a very serious offense, when what she actually did was a misdemeanor offense.
It all added up to a misdemeanor. Everything just added up to a misdemeanor. Everything I looked and read just kept misdemeanor, highlight, misdemeanor, misdemeanor. So then why am I sitting here if it's a misdemeanor? Give me a ticket, let me pay a fine, let me go about my way. I don't have to visit the jail. Okay, that's perfect for me. I'm happy. But no, it didn't work out that way.
Even Kimberly would look at you today and say, you know what, I know I did something wrong and I deserve to be punished. But no one would say that someone deserves to be punished more than what the state of New York has decided is the classification of this crime. We shouldn't be locking people up for murder when all they did was, you know, rob a grocery store. We shouldn't be locking people up for robbing a grocery store when all they did was steal $20 from their mom.
Then when I got my lawyer, every question I asked him, it was like, they're going to make an example out of you. That was basically it. If I read up on anything, asked any questions about any law, anything dealing with the law that I looked up, it doesn't have nothing to do with you. And I mailed him a letter stating my husband said he threatened me to do everything, that he wants to take the charges. He didn't acknowledge nothing. Told me he didn't have time to look at that paperwork. The letter that my husband sent didn't mean nothing. They're going to make an example out of you. That's it. Bottom line.
We have to have fair results. And what happened to Kimberly was not fair. And it was unfortunately because she didn't have a lawyer who was working hard for her that she got an unfair outcome.
This is the first mistake I ever made in my life. And it eats me up. I don't like to talk about it. I try to brush it off. I don't know. But it's like, it's always there.
She's only 10. 5 years later, this still has a real big effect on my family.
When there are problems in our criminal justice system, it disproportionately impacts communities of color. When there's somebody who's going before the court accused of a petty offense or a major offense without a lawyer or without a properly trained lawyer and without the resources necessary to mount an adequate defense, the face of that person is the face of a person of color overwhelmingly. And so the failure to meet the constitutional standard, the human rights standard of providing a legal representation for everybody who is accused of a crime is a problem of racial inequities as well.
I told the police, I was like, my husband got to get to dialysis today. That was a must. His blood was so thick, they had to cleanse it out. There was no one else up in Syracuse. We had to take him. Nobody even listened to me. No one listened. It was like, I don't think he ever made another dialysis appointment. I really don't. And I called my mom, and my mom was like, Jackie Gregg's dead. And the only thing I remember doing was dropping the phone and screaming, Mama, no. He said he was going to come up here and tell the people that he put that gun in the car. Mom, he talking about giving me 3.5 years. What am I going to do? He's gone. Now he can't do that. I never got a chance to go to the funeral. I never got a chance to tell my husband bye or anything.
Having an adequately funded, competent, talented defense lawyer is indispensable to the proper functioning of our criminal justice system and indeed our democracy. The people that represent the poor and people of color and the near poor who can't afford counsel in our criminal justice system are liberty's last champions. So it is to the benefit of everyone in the system that the defense perform its job adequately, otherwise the whole thing implodes on itself. The whole idea of an adversary system and putting the states to its proof beyond a reasonable doubt is to make sure that the system functions in a healthy way with integrity for all citizens, guilty or innocent, frankly. And that all falls apart unless you have a defense lawyer that has the money, that has the talent, that has the training to do the job.
They have a system set up in jail where you can call the lawyer's voicemail. I tried that every day, a couple of times a day, and it was always full. So jail ministry gave me his office number. My mom called and left messages. I have a sister named Sonia. She called and left messages, and he never got back in touch with anyone. I even wrote him a letter, 2 letters, trying to get him to just come talk to me. Come hear my case, come hear my side, come help me. SOS, help me. I'm in here for nothing. You know who helped me? The inmates that were in jail. They the ones told me, write the judge. You wrote the lawyer, he's not responding, write the judge. Explain to the judge your situation. And that's what got me back in court. The judge called me back into court. And he actually said to my lawyer, Tom Maris, Mrs. Wimbrone wrote me, and that's why we're back in this court, because Mrs. Wimbrone wrote me and was explaining to me her case. The judge at that time, he set me up with pretrial release, and by that time I had got evicted. They ended up sending me to a shelter, and I had to try to start all over again from nothing because I lost everything. I lost my husband. I lost everything. And material things will never take the place of Greg, never. But for me to go to jail for something I didn't do and to lose everything over a system that's supposed to be there to protect you from this happening, it doesn't.
Yeah, you know, every story has a bad guy, and one of the really sad aspects of the crisis in our indigent defense system is that everybody seems to think that the bad guy are the hardworking criminal defense lawyers, and that's just not the case. The bad guy here is the state of New York that has let down not just criminal defendants by violating their rights, but let down the lawyers who are working for them by not giving them the support that they need to do their jobs. And so what's wrong here is that the system is underfunded, which means that the lawyers who choose to work in it are overworked and underpaid. They're carrying hundreds of cases where they can't possibly have the time in the day. Even if they work 100-hour weeks, they can't devote enough time to each of their cases to make sure that justice is being done in each and every one of them. And so that's the real tragedy, is that the victims here are not just the criminal defendants who suffer the consequences, but also the lawyers who just don't have the tools that they need to do their jobs right. What we're really hoping with this litigation is that the state steps up to the plate and takes more responsibility.
Being in the criminal justice system is never a minor matter, no matter how minor the criminal accusation may be. And it's the job of defense lawyers to make sure that people get justice. It's about people losing their homes. It's about families getting irreparably torn apart. It's about people losing their high school diploma, their college diploma, their jobs, their livelihoods, and it impacts the individual who's before the court accused of criminal activity. It also impacts their kids. It impacts their parents. And sometimes it means that you can't be there to take care of somebody who is sick and is going to die without your care, because you don't have a whole network of resources to take care of them. When it happens because a person is before a judge and doesn't have a lawyer, doesn't have a competent lawyer because the system is so profoundly broken, well, then we have a serious problem that has to be remedied immediately and by the courts.
It's not a place that I would never wish for my worst enemy to go. Not to be away from your kids, especially if you don't deserve it. Everybody makes mistakes. There's nobody perfect. If it was a perfect world, then where would we all be at right now?
Because she was in this category of being charged with this first-degree felony for this marijuana she brought into the prison, the prosecutors could ask for and may have received after trial 8 years. So when threatened with that, and knowing her system to be, our criminal justice system to be what it was. Because remember, her attorney wasn't even with her at her first appearance for her bail hearing. So having that as your backdrop, what do you think your chances of success are going to be? Do you take the probation, or do you risk 8 years with a person who's just telling you that after 1 or 2 meetings? She did what anybody would do, in spite of the fact that, as we later learned, the case gets overturned on appeal. So this is part of the problem, because the facts don't matter, the situation controls.
Well, after I kind of came to grips at where I was at, okay, you couldn't go to school unless you didn't have your GED or your high school diploma. So that's only how you can get to a classroom. So I didn't have access to the lawyer books or none of that. So I asked one of the other girls, and she was nice enough to help me out and would copy the pages for me. And I sat and would write him, I wrote him a letter, even mailed him the copies of the pages. Told me he didn't have time to look at that paperwork.
The system moves too fast, and it doesn't pay enough attention to facts. One thing we have to do to help that is to actually increase funding for public defenders and the resources that they have, not just the money. We need to have people be able to have time to meet with their clients, talk to their clients, investigate the cases, and develop the facts of the case, and then present them to actual fact finders. We need to do things to move away from a plea-based system and to get back to the idea that we had originally of a trial-based system where people would actually have facts tested. We also need to reform our sentencing laws. She was facing way too much jeopardy initially. Many people are facing way too much jeopardy now. In New York City, you can be punished by up to a year in jail for jumping a turnstile. That's ridiculous. We have to really think about what our criminal justice system has become, what we want it to be.
There are experts from all over the country who, at the drop of a hat, can tell you, the following 10 things are the most important components of good representation in a criminal defense for a criminal defendant, and that with those things you're meeting the constitutional rights of these defendants and you're ensuring the right outcomes and fair outcomes in criminal prosecutions. What New York State needs to do is say, okay, we're going to step up and we're going to enforce those standards and make sure that the providers of these services have the resources that they need to meet those minimum standards. If we took that small, modest, logical step, we would cause a revolution in the way the right to counsel is respected in this state.
This is unjust. I'm not going to just let y'all make me another statistic. Let y'all make me be the scapegoat for a system that's so corrupt.
I'm not getting nothing for sitting here talking to you guys. I'm not getting nothing for still helping NYCLU out. I'm doing it for the kindness of my heart, because somebody in their firm took the kindness of their heart and said, hey, this girl needs some help. Can we help her? The same help that they helped me with, I'm giving the help back.
In 5 years, still haven't healed this pain. It still hasn't healed the pain of losing my husband. This system needs to change. The justice system needs to change.
I started my legal career as a criminal defense lawyer at Legal Aid, and we were decades ago engaged in the struggle to be able to provide adequate legal representation for our clients. We had to fight for the right to not just say hello to a client at arraignment and then let somebody else deal with the case tomorrow and the next day. We fought for the right to have continuity of representation. We fought for the right to be able to investigate our cases and to provide the defense that we thought was necessary to meet the constitutional standard that everybody's entitled to. This lawsuit is about ensuring that the system is in place so that the state of New York meets its obligation to ensure that every person who is accused of a crime and faces, as a result, the potential loss of their liberty has a lawyer who is properly trained and has the resources necessary to provide adequate legal representation. So that means that the system as it's now constituted is not fair, and the system that we're fighting for is one that provides for justice.